Welcome to the first Learn and Earn of 2019. We are so glad that you're joining us today.
If you've joined us in the past, we've changed it a little bit using ALN this year. So for this webinar, to earn points, you need to watch the entire video and there will be a secret phrase at the end. You'll then need to enter that secret phrase into the ALN portal to receive points for this webinar. And your submission will not be complete until you enter into that correct secret phrase. And we also ask that you fill out the survey at the end too. Now, this will be the first of 5 webinars, and you can earn 5 points for up to 5 max. So you can technically earn up to 25 points if you attend all 5 of the Learn and Earns. So before we begin our Learn and Earn today, let's start off with a word of prayer. Father God, thank you for everything that you have given us. Help us to clear out the distractions and really make room for what matters most in life so that we can be truly who you want us to be and what you've called us to do. Father, we can't do it without your help, so we ask for you to show us the areas that we need to let go. I pray that you would bless each person listening to this webinar, and I ask all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, so let's get started. This Learn and Earn is titled Simplify Your Life, How to Make Room for What Matters Most.
Well, I'm Nathan Gonzalez. I'll be one of your presenters today.
And I'm Amanda Saxton.
So first, what we want to do is go over our objectives. Today, we'll be discussing why it is important to simplify your life, ways to focus on what is important most, and then tips to declutter and practical ways to simplify your life.
Thank you, Nate. And I don't know about you, but I've really been impacted by this a lot, and I'm really excited to share with you guys some things we've learned. But the first thing I want to do is I want to ask you a question. So you may want to get out a pen or paper because later in the session we'll be asking you to do a little activity at the end too. But I want you to think about what is cluttering up your life right now. What is unnecessary? Take a few moments and just think about some things. All right, so for some of you guys, it may be a full schedule. You're wondering how you're going to get everything done, and it can come with a lot of stress. Also, maybe you have files or papers or so many emails. Or what about unnecessary meetings or closets overflowing? There's a lot of different things that we could mention, but those are just some examples, and we'll touch on this more in detail. But first, Nate's going to share some things about clutter for us.
So the first thing that we want to do is we want to define clutter. So when we're talking about clutter, clutter is an overabundance of possessions that collectively create chaotic and disorderly living spaces. And also, they're anything that has outlived its usefulness in your life, anything that doesn't belong in a space, whether because it belongs elsewhere in your home or life, or it may not belong in your home or your life anymore altogether. When we think of clutter, we may think of hoarding, or we may think of piles of paper. That is clutter for sure. But let's expand our view and recognize it's so much more than messiness and disorder in our lives. First, where does clutter come from? Clutter emerges from emotional attachment and associating a memory with an item. This can also be from an indecision with what to do with that item. So what we want to do is provide you with some examples of clutter, right? So physical clutter are items that are broken or unused, and they have no meaning or really anything that you can do with them any longer. Items that are in the wrong place of your home, items that belong to someone else. In transition, when we're talking about digital clutter, we can be speaking about excessive emails in your inbox, or of how about unread emails, phone applications that you no longer use, or even duplicate files in your computer that are creating desktop clutter. And lastly, emotional clutter can be thoughts in your head that you continue to think about, grudges that you're not forgiving, or people that bring you down, or these unbalanced relationships that we all deal with. And then lastly, habits. They're not necessarily a negative things, but they may be something that don't benefit you, or things that you've always done that don't really make you better as an individual or allow you to grow as a person.
All right, thank you, Nate. I feel like we can all relate to some aspect of that. And you may not relate to all of it, but I want you to think about some of the differences and how it relates to you. So I want you to look at this picture here. What do you feel when you see this picture? Nate, what do you feel when you see this picture?
Oh man, I got a headache. I'm getting anxiety just looking at it.
I'm kind of overwhelmed. It doesn't look very peaceful. May feel like you can't concentrate. And this is not to condemn anyone. Maybe this is what your house looks like, or your office, or maybe even a family member's. But let's look at some interesting research that shows some examples of this. So the average size of the American home has nearly tripled in size over the past 50 years. And get this, still 1 out of every 10 Americans rents off-site storage, the fastest growing segment of the commercial real estate industry over the past 4 decades. Wow. What do you think about that, Nate? Isn't that crazy? And get this, you only ever wear 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time. And over the course of our lifetime, okay, get this, this was really mind-blowing for me. We will spend a total of 3,600 hours or 153 days searching for misplaced items. The research found that we lose up to 9 items every day, almost 200,000 items in a lifetime. The most common at the top of the list were phones, keys, and sunglasses, and paperwork. Also, the research shows that clutter can negatively impact mental well-being, particularly among women. And clutter can also induce a physiological response, including increased levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So this is not a great picture, would you say, Nate?
Not at all.
No. So while these are examples of physical clutter, sometimes the areas in our life may be cluttered like this too. So it's not just physical, it really has a lot to encompass with different areas. So some of the reasons we may hold on to clutter are positive memories or even negative memories too. What about postponing decisions or thinking, oh, I know I get this one a lot, and I personally think, oh, it might be useful someday, right? You don't want to get rid of it because you may use it. Or a fear of obligation to hold on to it, maybe a loved one who's passed away, you feel obligated, or even the fear of going without. And so I want to key in here and recognize that the goal is not zero clutter in our life all the time, but it's reducing it enough so that it doesn't get in our way, whether it be physically, emotionally, or spiritually. And we really have to set ourselves free and let go and recognize it's just stuff. So let's talk about some other areas of why it's important to simplify your life.
All right. So we all understand that clutter is something that we all deal with, but the question that remains is, why should we simplify our life? So we're going to go over a couple reasons here. And the first one is reducing stress. With every increased possession, it adds an increased stress and even worry to our life. More stuff you own, the more the stuff owns you. We're in a constant state of wanting more, and we'll talk about that. But even with our distractions, we should be focusing on having more focus and clarity on what is most important to you. One of the things that I notice is that in order for us to change, we must be aware of these certain things that we're dealing with. In regards to more fulfillment and meaning, I want you to think about how much time you spend taking care of what you own, or even valuing what you own. We will have more time for other things and even be able to appreciate those things that we do have when we let go of clutter. And then we can spend less time organizing and maintaining and managing and looking for storage solutions and fixing and replacing those items that we own. One of the great things that happens when we simplify our life is that new possibilities emerge. When you clear the clutter, you are able to have new things come into your life, new opportunities, new people that you can meet, or you can even see the things that in front of you that you even taken for granted and move forward with those. Lastly, we want to talk about an important part, which is contentment. Culture tells us that we need more and more and more. Sometimes you need to think about those advertisements that bombard us with the latest new gadget that they tell us that we need. And sometimes we think it would be better if we had more. But we can be content with the things that we do have, but then also understand that if we are blessed with more money, we can also be more generous with the things that we have, and we can be content in our generosity.
And I want to draw your attention to this quote here. It says, "The ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak." And so it's important to distinguish what is necessary in your life and what is not. So what is important to you? What do you value? And here's an important question. What can you let go of in order to make room for the necessary?
Wow.
So let's learn how we can apply this to your life. And I have a practical example for me. The past few months, I've been going through my closets and my bedrooms and my house, trying to get rid of things, not just rid of things, but recognizing the duplicates that I have in my life. And Nate, I was going through a huge bin in my closet, and I found that I had so many purses. There were purses that I hadn't used in years, or that I had accumulate in middle school, and I was like, why do I have all these purses? And you know what I found? I found that I was really only grabbing for 3 or 4 that I used the most often. And I really didn't need those many purses in my life. And so I gathered them together. And of course, I still kept some. But what I realized is that when you have more of anything, have you noticed that you really can't enjoy anything? You can't see anything, you can't find anything. And I wasn't really able to go to the depths of the bottom of that purse bin and really enjoy it with because I didn't know it was there. But when we have everything, it actually takes away from our enjoyment of everything that we have, because we have maybe too much and we can't see clearly. But the reality is that God has given us things to enjoy, and He wants us to enjoy things in life and the blessings He's given us. But is every drawer in your house completely full? Is every closet packed solid? Is every corner completely crammed? Get this. Is there any margin or space in your calendar? What about, is every single day of the week booked solid? Is every portion of your afternoon scheduled, every moment decided on? And is there really any space or time in your life to really make room for what matters most? And so I know I just gave you an example of a physical item that maybe I struggle with, but what is it for you? Is it accessories, or is it t-shirts, or is it your calendar, or maybe your pantry is overflowing and you haven't used some of those items that you need to use. But this is so much more about getting rid of stuff. It's really like simplicity is about freedom from the materialism, about accumulating more and the consumerism and thinking about that we have to have more, like Nate mentioned about the contentment. And also it's a freedom from workaholism too, about working so much just so that we can buy things that we have to find a place to store, right? Or that we may not even use or truly enjoy. But it's really simplicity. Simplicity is about freedom to live holistically, live that full life that Christ has called us to, and really find true rest. And so we have to create this room by decreasing or removing other commitments or activities that we have committed to.
Absolutely. So what we'll do now is we'll kind of look at a biblical principle that's right here in Matthew, and on the screen you'll see a shortened version. What I'll do is I'll read the entirety of the verse from Matthew 6:19-21, which says, "Do not store up yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also." All material things here on earth are destructible. We know that. They're subject to wear and tear. They can be here one day and gone the next. But the intangible things, such as love, those things last forever. Rather than living our life to accumulate things, let's think about the rewards in heaven that last for eternity. The last line of that verse says, "For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also." So I ask you, where is your treasure? At its root, the issue is our value system. What matters to us most? What captures our attention and interests us most? Material things are not bad. They simply need to be kept in the proper perspective. They're not everything. Getting rid of clutter enables us to pursue God's path and purpose more effectively. Jesus says, "I have come that they may have life and life abundant." He wants us to have more time and freedom for the things that are most important, the things that we value most.
So I want to give you a chance to apply this practically to your life. And I want you to think about what matters most to you. So if you can, I want you to, again, get out a piece of paper and a pen, and ask yourself, what is most important to you? And jot down some things that come to mind. I'll give you a few seconds to do this. So go ahead and take some time to do that. So I know you still may be writing, but some examples that come to mind and some people may jot down are your family, maybe specifically your spouse, your children, your parents. What about your friends? Your relationship with God and your spiritual growth, your health, making time for physical rest or even physical activity and nutrition. What about serving others too? And also, don't forget fun and play, right? Because Nate, isn't that a key part of
Absolutely
making room for what's important?
Yes.
So going back to what we asked you to write down about what is cluttering up your life right now, how would it be if you own less stuff, or even if you let go of those things that are cluttering your life? So how would your life improve? So just a question to think about there. And so right now we want to get practical on thinking about how you can practically do this. But I love this quote here. It says, "The best things in life aren't things." And also I want you to recognize too that sometimes the best things in life will probably never be checked off a to-do list, wow, right? That's good. That's really and so good. Recognizing how important it is to view these things. So right now we're going to give you some specific tips to simplify your life. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to talk about simplifying your possessions. Now, we talked about this a little bit before about with that picture that we saw about clutter, but I want to give you some practical things that you can do, even starting today or even this weekend if you are so inspired by our webinar here. So the first one is the 1-year rule. Nate, I don't know about you, but I struggle with this one because the 1-year rule is if you haven't used it in a year, then let it go. I know it's so hard to do, but our possessions, we want our possessions to represent who we are and who we want to become, and it supports our goals moving forward. And so if we're holding on to stuff that maybe it represents a time in our life when we were a different person. And if we're no longer that person anymore, then, or maybe clothes we have that we think we may wear again, but we just know we're not going to go back to that. Or maybe a hobby that you have a lot of stuff that's a hobby for you and you are no longer into that. Well, it's okay to let it go and maybe donate it to someone who may really love it and really enjoy it. But guess what? Kind of what Nate said about letting new things emerge. It's what about if you are experiencing a new hobby? That leaves room to then be able to gain new things that you could experience. The next thing is about having a place for everything. So everything in your home should have a place for it. And so if you bring another item into your home, then you need to find a place for it. So asking the question, okay, do I want to make room for this item? Also, another practical tip is to have 3 piles. One for things you're going to keep, one for things that are maybe not, just going to decide, and then another one for things you're going to give away or just simply trash. Because sometimes we just need to let go of things, just put it in the trash. No one else will want it, right? And so we have to also recognize the clutter cost. So what do I mean when I say this? I mean the clutter cost. So it can be hard to get rid of things we spend a lot of money on, right? I know for me, it's like, oh, but I spent so much on that, I should have used it. But if we're keeping things we're no longer wearing or using or loving, then it has a cost. Every object carries a burden as well as a benefit. Recognizing the storage cost to store that item, or even the mental cost of thinking what we're going to do with it, or even if you've moved in a few years, thinking about what it would cost to carry those items on. The other thing is to recognize to purge often. So really going through and being able to really make those decisions on what you value. Another quick tip is to have a donation bin handy. So meaning like if you see something that you don't really feel like you could use anymore and someone else could benefit from it, then having just a bin in your house that you know is a donation pile, and when it's full, then to make a plan to go to wherever you go to donate your items, and then it'll be a lot more easier for you.
I love that. The next thing that we want to talk about is finances and how to simplify our life through our finances. So first would be to start with your values. What matters most? And that's really going to allow you to put things in perspective. The next thing that we would recommend is to create a budget and give every line item a name, removing the unnecessary so only the essential items remain. This is more easily said than done. This may take trial and error. This may take time, but at least you can start putting things into practice, allow things needs to come to your awareness so that you can change. Next, we want to talk about tracking your spending. So that looks different for everybody. We understand that some people like to do it through applications. Some people a little more old school and want to do it with a pencil and pen and write things down every month. Whatever works for you, do that so that you're going to be able to kind of see what you're doing month to month. One of the hardest things I know, especially for me, is buying less, or even before you make a purchase, wait 24 hours and see, do I really need that? That's something that can really help you instead of making those impulsive shopping decisions. And then lastly, a 2-week shopping ban to challenge your shopping habits. Kind of like purge yourself from shopping just to see where you are and what your tendencies are as far as what you buy and how frequent you buy those things.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. And then the next one we want to talk about are simplifying your time commitments. So really being selective and being able to say no to the things in your schedule. So maybe you need to practically pull out your schedule or your calendar and look at what you're committed to and still keep those commitments that you've kept, but then going forward when a new request comes in, being very intentional and talking with your family members about that too, about how you want to spend your time, or maybe getting your spouse together on board and thinking about what you truly want to make room for. And also scheduling things that are most important to you first. So thinking it's close to the beginning of this year. What about scheduling that vacation? I mean, summer will be here before we know it, and making sure you have that time off, or even scheduling time with friends, with your spouse, or even time to pursue your goals and your hobbies too.
That's right. For me personally, I believe goal setting is very important, but there are times where we may have too many goals. We may be a little ambitious in what we want to do, or even the unrealistic goals. So what I really recommend is to focus on a few things, or even maybe focus on one thing and accomplish that goal, whether it's short term or it's long term. Focus on that, make it a reality, and then move on the next so that you don't clutter your mind.
And then the next one is screen time. So this could be as simple as maybe simplifying the amount of TV you watch, or the internet surfing, or even turning off unnecessary notifications, or even, oh my gosh, I know I recently did this, unsubscribing from promo or spam emails, because that could take up a lot of our time, thinking, and a lot of clutter in our screens. Also, removing apps and programs that you don't use.
And last but not least, we're going to be talking about stuff in your head, the things that you think about. I know for me, I am a thinker. I'm very analytical. So I'm constantly thinking about 10,000 different things, which can make me a little less productive. So when we talk about open loops, when we talk about things in our mind that we may have, like when we're talking about goals, too many things going on where there's a lack of focus, let's look at our priorities and see what we can focus on, prioritize, and then spend time thinking about what your next action is going to be on that to-do list. Okay, what am I going to do next? This can be something that you do through your journal writing. You can even start to write things down that you want to work on. One of the things that I love to speak to people about is negative thoughts. If we have a high amount of negative thoughts within our mind, it's going to be difficult to accomplish those things or to think positively of yourself. And then moving forward, there may be some grudges that you need to make amends. We understand that life is too short, and we want to make sure that we're not allowing other people or these grudges to control our emotions. To be able to simplify mentally and emotionally, it's not as easy as the physical. So that may take some work. It may take some trial and error, but these are things that we want to bring to your attention, and hopefully you can work on in the future.
All right, so I want to bring your attention to a small little pamphlet that was written in 1967. It was called The Tyranny of the Urgent. And there's this quote that says, "We live in a constant tension between the urgent and the important. The problem is that many important tasks need not be done today or really even this week," right? There's so many urgent tasks that come to us, a phone call or an email or a person requesting things from us, which are not good or bad. I mean, it's either we just have so many things come in and we don't really make room for the important things in our life. And we feel like we have to do the urgent things, but it's the important things, the things we actually do have to do, those need to be the ones that we really make time for and maybe even schedule time for. And so urgency does not equal importance. We need to be able to discern the difference. And so sometimes we may become a slave to the tyranny of the urgent. But we have to recognize, like I mentioned earlier, that God gives us all things to enjoy. But sometimes we can't enjoy those things because the urgent things are suffocating us. So I want to invite you to enjoy life again, to look at all the gifts that God has given you and realize that we don't need to be bossed around or controlled by the urgent things that come into our life, or even controlled by the clutter in our lives or the things that are suffocating us, and really allow make room for what is most important. And so that brings us back again to this phrase, the best things in life aren't things, and that is our secret phrase for this Learn and Earn. And so I encourage you guys, I ask you to input that secret phrase into the ALN portal to receive points for this webinar. So again, your submission will not be complete and you won't earn points unless you enter the correct secret phrase. And if you have questions, I encourage you to read the description in the webinar, which will give you some more examples or give you a description. And also, please take the survey that we have for the webinar as well. And so I want to leave you with this quote here from Ronald Reagan. He says, "Live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak kindly, and leave the rest to God." What do you think about that, Nate?
I love that. I love that.
And I encourage you to think about what's your next step. What is the next action that you need to take in order to really apply some of the things that we've been talking about?
All right, so just concluding what we've been going through as far as simplifying your life, we want to make sure that we offer you these important resources. So please remember that biometric screenings will be held on individual campuses. If it's something that you can attend, you can send in a form of the paperwork to our offices so that we can get that. Trust transformation is one of my favorite things to talk about. It's a very popular class. And then lastly, Smart Dollar can help you as far as the financial aspects that we were talking about today. And if you have any questions, please go to creationhealthemployees.com, where most of our information is on there, and that will be a great resource for you.
We hope that you guys have enjoyed this webinar, and we thank you guys so much for attending today.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.